We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
As an election approaches, more and more we're reliant on the pages of the Fourth Estate and the digital media to inform us about what is happening. However, what happens when they abdicate that responsibility? Well, somebody who's been following it and digging deep into what happens to modern journalism is Liberty Nation's executive editor, Lisa K. Donna. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Hello there, Mr. Angelides. You've had a lot going on in your own politics over there this week.
I have been deeply involved in psephology, I believe it's called, the passing of polls and whatnot, figuring out what happened in the United Kingdom, yes. And of course in France, which was quite a shocking turnaround now that Monsieur President Macron has to deal with communists, socialists, and Greens to try and do any kind of deal because he was so determined to put down the far right.
Well, let me just say, between the people in the UK, the French, I think we got you all beat for excitement.
Well, you know what?
I have to
agree. America is really setting the pace for what's new and improved in the U.S. political shenanigans in general. And I think that brings us nicely, Lisa, as a nice little segue into what's happening with the American media. Now, it seems to me that, and this is obviously something that hasn't just happened overnight. Obviously, we had yellow journalism. We've had periods where people have pushed their parties rather than presented things factually and without bias as they're kind of supposed to do. But I think we've reached a crescendo of this right now. And I think there was a great article that you wrote for the pages of libertynation.com, the Andy Warholization of journalism. Which
Hats off to you for the title.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yes, that title. It came to me in a dream, in a flash, if anybody...
Even though not everybody agrees he coined the phrase 15 minutes of fame, but it was worth doing anyway.
Absolutely right. I believe somebody in the 19th century French writer first came up with something similar to that. But he did repeat it. So we can do it.
Anyway, the article.
So yeah, this article, and it covered what's really just one aspect, really. I guess there are three aspects of what I perceive to be happening to modern journalism. And one of the main ones, which is what you really dove into, is that people seem to be putting themselves in the story, almost creating like this meta-narrative in which they're involved in the happenings of world events simply because they're writing about it. Now, give us your take.
Well, what I was pointing out basically the use of I, which is, when I went to J school, that was verboten. You didn't write the word I. And what I've noticed is that we moved from reportage to the personal essay. And, every now and then, I suppose we all deserve a personal essay here or there, especially if it's something that was really pertaining to the story you're writing. But to make every story over and over about me, I, me, I just don't think that's the way to go when you're trying to report on something. I think there was a nice wall of separation that existed there for a long while, but it seems to be fading, and I'm sorry for it. I think journalism is not doing what it should do anymore. And, it's bad enough we have to label ourselves conservative news because there's so many people out there that are giving the leftist bent. And this is what happened with the cover-up of Joe Biden's ailment or illness or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, they've decided to take the pronoun wars out into the wider world, and they're putting themselves into the story. Instead of telling us this is what people who we are aware of are thinking, this is what is happening in the world, what they're saying is this is how it affects me. And we see this very much on the left. And I get it that they're so invested in this idea that identity trumps all. And I've been thinking a lot about why so many people are invested in the idea of identity trumps all. It means that they're no longer responsible. It's an abdication of personal responsibility. But then they pull the personal element back, disregarding the responsibility, and try and make it about that. So we see so often, as a woman, as a black man, as a shama shama. Sorry, shama shama is a Chinese thing for what? Sorry.
A Chinese thing for what?
It's a Chinese thing for what? Shama shama.
Oh, what?
Sorry.
Okay. Learn something new every day.
There
on
you
the
go. Something
radio.
interesting.
There you
See,
go.
I, as somebody who speaks Chinese, you see how dull that is? I could hear people turning off their radios as soon as they said, I, as somebody. And so what they've done is they've adopted this idea that identity trumps all, and therefore their identity is relevant to the story that they're writing because of how it impacts them. Now, there is a space for that, but it's not the front pages of the national newspapers, is it?
Well, it is now, and right after the debate, where the debate to end all debates, I guess we'll call it for at the moment. I opened up the New York Times, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4 columnists that were talking about I barely could, I can't believe I, and I was like, why does everything have to be sifted through the personal lens? Why can't we say, objectively, he was struggling, he was having a tough time? Why does it have to do with you and I? Part of it may be the responsibility, but I think part of it, Mark, is worshiping at the altar. I think of self. Everybody feels like they have to bring meaning to everything personally. Everything doesn't have personal meaning to everyone all the time.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, is that it's the ultra personal self, because what they are doing is they're almost genuflecting to their public personas,
or to their ego. And I mentioned the issue
which
of
is
Chris
it's kind of
Wallace.
the same thing, right?
Right. I mean, I mentioned the issue of Chris Wallace, and not to beat up on somebody who kick him when he's down, but he did the 2020 debate, and it was really patently absurd. He kept interrupting. He was very one-sided. He just wasn't a neutral arbiter. And I think the people at Fox got so fed up with him, somehow his next contract was not negotiated, and off he went to CNN. But look, I think he had he had that Sunday show on Fox for years, and a lot of it centered around him. And that, I think that is the fundamental problem. We've got to take ourselves out of every story.
So that makes sense if we're dealing with the Fourth Estate as honest brokers of information. But if we look at them as advocates for their political side, then it begins to make a lot more sense, I think.
Well, this is what's happened, and this is what the media is really, licking its wounds right now, because at least the leftist media is. Because those of us who are on the right, we have said all along, Mr. Biden seems to be having problems here. There seems to be physical issues. There seems to be cognitive issues. We've written about it exhaustively, extensively. And yet everyone on the left was busy calling us cheap fakes, and we're just pointing out blah, 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 and he's sharp as a tack. And now, the jig is up. And so they're really, backpedaling. Well, I sort of saw this. I sort of saw this. Well, you didn't bother telling anybody on your network or in your paper. He was sharp as a tack last week in your paper.
We are going to delve deeper into this sharp as a tack narrative after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.